Somewhere in the midst of Dad passing on in 1989 at the age of 71, Grandma Dora passing away in 2006 at the unbelievable age of 101, and the birth of our first granddaughter, Taylor, in November of 2004, I've been inspired to complete my first book of reflections. I want to express my love and appreciation to my mom and dad and two of the greatest brothers a kid brother could ever hope for. It was my close-bound family that gave me the memories and foundation to be able to share some fond reflections now some 50 years later. From the time we were born, we began carving our path of life. As we progress along that path, we're continually leaving a trail of experiences which mold us into who we are at this moment in time. Reflection of those experiences and the willingness to share them with our loved ones help create our legacy. Leaving a legacy comes in various forms. However, I truly believe the most treasured methods is our personalized written thoughts, beliefs, and personal accounting of past experiences. Why write a book? Well, reflection on our childhood can be a great energizer as it helps us to remember our roots and helps us resolve who we are. My purpose in sharing reflections from my early years is threefold. Number one, for entertainment. A little humor never hurts anyone. Secondly, it allows me personally to leave a glimpse of who I am to family, friends, and future generations. And third, to serve as an encouragement for you to leave your own personalized legacy in some written form. It's my desire to provide some light entertainment. I hope to bring a smile to your face and perhaps help you trigger a warm memory of your own childhood. I've chosen to put a humorous spin on most of my reflections, thus appealing to what I think is our greatest sense of all, our sense of humor. It brings tears to my eyes to think that one day my grandchildren or even great-grandchildren can pick up this book and know a little more about who their grandpa or great-grandpa really was. I think it will be a treasure beyond words. Let's just stop and reflect for a moment and put a little exercise on our memory. Stop and think a moment. What was the very first thing in your life that you remember? It seems the more distant memories become, the more clearly they are remembered. Many things we experienced years ago seem to hold greater meaning now than when they actually took place. Often we find humor in many things that seem serious at the time. Many times things we did were done simply because of happenstance, yet served a true purpose in helping mold us into who we are. So, were you able to recall the first thing you remembered at an early age? That's really a challenge, isn't it? Well, the first thing I remember was around the age of 2. We lived out in the country in Tennessee, and I can visualize myself and my cousin Pam, who was age 3, trying to cross a rapidly flowing creek while hanging on to a slippery log. I'm sure we feared for our life, yet were determined to get to the other side. Dad rescued us before we reached our destination, and once his fear of losing us was gone, I think I remember holding my hands over my rear end in an attempt to avoid that belt to the butt from stinging so much. Maybe it was the belt to the butt that really caused such a vivid memory. Nevertheless, I never tried that trick again. Okay, now, what about your first memory? When I thought about writing this book, I wanted to come up with one that would reflect my intention, which is to look back in time, recall fond memories, and share them in a somewhat humorous yet sensitive way. Thus, the title of my book is Reflections, Growing Up in the 50's. I feel privileged to have grown up in such an era in which even today is an era that all ages seem to envy. Its simplicity and somewhat innocence are like a magnet we're all drawn toward. I entered the 50's at age 3, actually, and exited that wonderful decade as a 13-year-old teenager. Often today, as I look at my reflection in the mirror, even though I have more wrinkles than I care to mention, I can still see that little boy I used to be. Time flies. One of my favorite sayings of all time is, "Time, oh time in your flight, Make me a child again just for tonight. I think this echoes at least an occasional wish for most all adults. My family moved from a small town in Middle Tennessee in 1950 to a small town in Central Florida called Auburndale. I knew this had to be a major step in Mom and Dad's life as they left the comfort of their lifetime surroundings as well as all their relatives and went into a somewhat unfamiliar territory. I think Dad had a few connections in Florida, but very few. As I look back on those times and how difficult that decision must have been, I admire their desire to venture out away from the farm upbringing by spreading their wings. At that time, Dad was 32 and Mom was 29. I was 3 and my oldest brother was 9 and middle brother was 7. When we first hit Central Florida, we lived for several months in a very small house with an outhouse as a bathroom. Soon we moved into a newly constructed house with 2-bedroom, 2-bath, a living room, and a kitchen. We had a concrete slab front porch and a small back porch. Even though this house was small for 5 people, especially by today's standards, it worked out fine for us. We actually lived in that house at 24 Webb Lane for over 15 years until all of us boys moved out and on our own. Mom and Dad lived there beyond that. Through the years, Dad always worked hard, whether it be managing a sawmill operation deep in the woods of Kissimmee, auto mechanic, or carpenter. He always provided for his family to the extent we never felt in need. Mom always managed the home fund as she was always a stay-at-home mom. I feel blessed that I always had Mom there when I came home from school and the fact that she was always available to talk to me about anything, anytime. In addition, she never let the least bit of dust settle on anything. Along with my 2 brothers, we know that we were truly blessed with a dream Mom and Dad. A little bit of a beaver cleaver sound going on here, you might say. I know that they agree as to how fortunate we were to have such a loving and caring Mom and Dad who allowed us to grow up in a calm family atmosphere in a great place in Central Florida. Otherwise, we might have grown up as hillbillies in the hills of Tennessee, never realizing the many opportunities that stood before us. Of course, I'm just joking about Tennessee. I have a lot of good friends and relatives in Tennessee still to this day, and it's still one of the favorite states in my mind.